In the last episode, we talked about one way I enjoy the hobby without buying comic books. Well, we're going to continue that theme with this episode today, so stay tuned. Welcome back, comic book fans. This is Rusty again with Collector Auctions, and in today's episode, I'm going to pick up from the theme that we started last week when we were talking about a way to enjoy the comic book hobby without actually buying comic books. In that episode, I talked about my company, theautographcard.com, and how I created several different cards, trading cards, that were designed for collecting autographs and collecting sketches either through the mail or in person when you go to a convention. And that was one way that I started collecting or enjoying the comic book hobby back around 2008, 2010, when those cards were introduced. I would go to the conventions and I was still getting comics signed, but I was also getting these cards signed in lieu of a lot of comic books. And if you guys haven't had a chance to watch the last episode, I'll leave a link at the very end of the show and in the description so you can watch that. And you can see a lot of the great autographs that I've gotten over the last 14 years. But in this episode, we're going to pick up on that theme a little bit about how I went to comic book conventions for years and years, even before the autograph card was invented, and what I did at those conventions. And it's real simple. It's nothing new. You guys are doing it today. I'm still doing it today. You're getting comic books signed. But the way I went about getting comic books signed over the years, and I continue to this day, is I don't necessarily get a lot of... When I say new comic book, I don't mean new comic books right off the stand. I mean unsigned comic books signed. What I normally was doing throughout the years is I started getting books signed by multiple creators. So when I would go to a con, I would focus on the books that I needed additional signatures on. If I'd gotten a writer the year before and the artist was there, I would get the artist or the inker or the editor or something like that, and I would add multiple signatures to the books. And that has become the theme of a lot of what is in my collection these days. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't get new comic books signed or unsigned comic books signed. And a lot of times what I'll do is, if there's somebody new and there's a special book or something like that, sure, I'll still start new books every now and then. But even with those books, I will continue the theme of trying to get the additional creators. As I said, if I get the writer, then I want the artist, and vice versa, and so on and so on. And that is what this episode is going to start. It's going to start a series of these videos, these episodes just like this, where I talk about and pull out comics from my collection over the years that I have gotten. And there's some of my favorite comics that I've gotten signed, and some of the comics aren't that big. Some of them are big, some of them are small. But there's stories behind every one of them, and there's reasons why they are special in my collection. So this is part one, the first episode of pulling some of the favorite comics out of my collection to show off, to show you what I've gotten signed over the last 25... Actually, I should take that back. 20 years. I should say the last 40 years, honestly, because some of these got started way long ago, and I've just continued to add signatures to them over the years. So sit back, enjoy this episode, and like I said, this is going to be the first in multiple episodes, and I'm going to probably scatter these out throughout the year and be able to show off some of the collection. I'm only going to spotlight 5 books per episode and go over them. I think that's a pretty decent number, but hope you enjoy this format and this little bit of a change of pace for this channel. As I said in the last episode, I'm going to try to be bringing different content to the channel rather than just comic book unboxings and CGC unboxings, or even just comic book hauls. This is going to be a little bit different. It's going to show you a different aspect to the hobby and about the way I go about collecting and enjoying the hobby. And just to the point of, at the very beginning, about not buying comic books at the show. Honestly, went for years, and this was my main focus. I would get creators to sign the books just like everybody else, but that was my main focus. And I honestly, for years, I really didn't spend hardly any money at any of these conventions. I wasn't necessarily into the back issues at the time. I should have been. I'd gone through phases where I've gone and gotten back issues. There was a lot of smaller shows, but once the Baltimore Comic Con, my local Comic Con, really started, I started focusing on getting the creators to sign things. I'd gone through the 90s going to a lot of different shows, and I had built up my collection that I was pretty happy with at the time, and I just wasn't as interested in going back and getting back issues. So this episode shows you what I was doing all that time, and as I said, I continue to still do that to this day. When I look at the lineup at the big conventions that I go to, when I don't travel a lot, I go to Baltimore Comic Con because it's local, it's right here in my backyard, and I go to Heroes Con, so that kind of limits what I do. I don't have a lot of time to be able to travel to some of the other cons, but I do pretty good with both of those cons, being able to get a lot of the creators that I've really liked, and I've done well over the years. And there's been some LCSs in the area, especially, that have also added signings along the way too, so I've been able to utilize that as well. But as I said, sit back, enjoy the books, and guys, last plug before we get into that is definitely slap that subscribe, smash the like, and click on the notification bell if you like this kind of content each and every week, Mondays and Fridays. I don't want you guys to miss out on anything, and I hope you enjoy these episodes, and I appreciate each and every one of you who check in each week. And that's it. Enough of the sales plug. Let's get into the books. All right, so the very first comic book that I want to show off that I have gotten signed over the years is my very first comic that I ever collected as a collector. And what I mean by that is, I grew up in southern West Virginia. We did not have local comic book shops near us. We literally had a drugstore or the local hospital that had comic books. But in terms of back issues, I was forced, because of the location, to use a service or a company that I found, one of the stores that I found advertising some of the comic books back in the early 80s. And very first comic book that I ever bought as a collector, my grandmother paid for it. I remember ordering from J&S Comics. I think they're out of the New England area. They may still be around today. I haven't checked on that for a long time, but I sent away for a catalog, and I got a little paper catalog back, and the very first comic that I ever bought was an Avengers book. And I'll show it to you in a second, and I'll take it out and I'll show you the autographs. Well, the way I started, I was an Avengers fan, and I started reading the Avengers about issue 112, 113, about the time Mantis joined the team. Had no idea who that character was, but by that point I could tell you who Thor was and Iron Man, and I was learning about this all at the same time, all at the exact same moment. All the books that came out in those 72, 73, 74 time frame, and didn't know a lot about any of this, but I continued getting most of those books, and I remember getting up to issue 129. We're still in the 70s, of course, and that beautiful cover with Kang. In fact, I'm not going to get it down now, but right above, this is issue right here. This is issue 120. I've got prints of issues 123 and then 129 up there above. And beautiful front cover with Kang on it, and I was fascinated by that character and about the ability to time travel and things like that. It quickly made Kang one of my favorite characters in Marvel, one of my favorite villains. And so when I got time to buy my very first comic book, I decided that I needed to go and learn more about Kang. I was going to go back and buy back issues with Kang in it, and I looked at the prices, and I know what my grandmother who bought this for me, I decided, okay, well, I can't break the bank and go all the way back to issue 8. I can't do issue 24. And I was buying low-grade copies that were kind of affordable. What was affordable was issue number 69, this one right here. And this copy right here is my original, very first comic I ever collected as a collector. I've saved it all these years. It was in probably a VG plus kind of grade. I don't remember. I just remember it was very inexpensive, and I Fascinated by this. Now, I didn't buy it for the artist or the writer. I bought it because it featured Kang in it. And in this storyline, and this has become a kind of a key comic, is that it is the first appearance of the Grandmaster, and it is also the first appearance of the Squadron Sinister, which would later be changed to the Squadron Supreme. Hyperion, Whizzer, Dr. Spectrum were in that final panel in this book, and I was fascinated by this whole story and everything. To be honest with you, at some point later, I of course got the next issue, and I learned more about the Squadron Sinister and those characters a little bit more. But for me, this was a Kang story, so I was fascinated by this. In the early 90s, I got a chance at a local comic book shop, I think down in Silver Spring, Maryland, or in that area. They brought in Sal Buscema, and I have got a chance over the years to meet him several times, but I got him to sign my original copy, and I gave him the story, and of course he was very, when you tell stories to creators like this, I think they appreciate this. I'm sure they hear it all the time, but I can't say that I was the biggest Sal Buscema fan at that point. It was only after the fact that I realized that most of my early childhood and comic book reading was influenced by Sal Buscema. My very first comic right here, Sal Buscema. My first Captain America books were all Sal Buscema. My first Defender books, Sal Buscema. For years, reading The Incredible Hulk, it was still Sal Buscema. I mean, such a part of my childhood, and it was a great time to finally meet him. My wife went with me. We have some beautiful sketches. At some point, I will talk about the Captain America books, and I will talk about the sketches, and I'll talk about more about Sal Buscema as well. But we're talking about this particular book right here. So let me show you what he signed. Now, in the early 90s, creators, and even for years later, were still signing on the inside splash page. And let me try to be real careful with this here. You can see that there's Sal Buscema's signature down there at the bottom. And you also notice that Roy Thomas signed this as well. Now, last year at Heroes Con, I got Roy Thomas to sign. It wasn't the first time I'd gotten Roy Thomas in a lot of years, but it was the first time since I had met Sal in early 90s that I had gotten a chance to get something signed by him. So he signed this book. And here, I'm going to put it back in the bag and board as we speak so we don't cause any more damage than we need to. And I was able to give him the same story, and he had the same sort of gratitude that Sal did about that. It isn't about... They do this because they love comics, and I think they get a lot of joy out of the fans enjoying the comics that they create. And so that was a nice way to share that with him. So thank you, Sal Buscema, Roy Thomas, on this book right here. I appreciate that. This will be a lifelong book that I keep in my PC. All right, next up is an absolute favorite book by a lot of people. It is the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill in Thor 337. This is when Walt Simonson came back to the book to take it over, and he just absolutely blew it up. I mean, blew it up just like Beta Ray Bill is blowing up the trade dress here. And unbelievable storytelling. It was even better than what he had done, than Walt had done earlier on Thor, and just absolutely revolutionized Thor and the book and the look and everything at that time. And at some point, now I don't remember if this was one of my original copies or not, but at some point I got Walt to sign this. Now, Walt and Louise Simonson, if I recall, lived in or around the DC area back in the 90s and back 80s, 90s. I'm not sure when, but I remember going to these serendipity shows that were put on. They usually, as I recall, being put on down in Silver Spring, Maryland at the Silver Spring Armory. And I remember getting this book signed, and I remember getting a bunch of X Factor book signs as well. I've got a bunch of Thor books that have been signed over the years as well. But again, here we are in the still in the 90s, and we're getting, you notice, there's no signature on the cover. Now, you also notice I got an awful stain down there. I'll never, one, it doesn't bother me that much because I'm not going to get these graded. Any books that I've got signed that are signed on the inside of the book, I'll never get graded because I want to see those signatures. They bring a lot of memory to me. It doesn't, I don't know, it's not the same to get them, to know that they're in there. It's you get to see them, and it's part of your memories and everything. But here's the book. As I said, I've got a nasty stain right down there. But let me open it up. And, ooh, I forgot. I got Jim Shooter to sign this too. But look here on the inside cover here. Down at the bottom, you see Walt's signature, and you got Jim Shooter. Now, Jim Shooter, I know I added in the last year, probably down at Heroes Con, either this year or last year. But having a Walt Simonson signed book like this is awesome. This is a PC book right here. As I said, it was one that it's a newsstand to begin with, but that doesn't really matter to me. But it is one that I'll keep, as I said, it's not going to get graded, so it's going to stay in the PC. But it's also one that I upgraded a year ago when I went to Heroes Con. I had picked up another copy of issue number 1. Now, this was a direct version, but it was a very nice direct copy. I think I got this off of Heritage Auctions, I think. And I cleaned and pressed it, and we were able to get a 9.6 on that, which I was ecstatic at. But you can see, by this point, we're doing signatures on the cover, and you can see his unique signature right there. If you can avoid the glare, you can see it right there. So I did upgrade this one, mostly because I love this book, and who wouldn't want to have this in the PC? So that right there was an upgrade, but I will keep the other one. Here, let's put this in the background so you guys can still see it. All right. So the third book that I want to spotlight in this first episode like this is a favorite of mine. It is a second copy that I had picked up probably in the late 80s. Yeah, I think it was the late 80s. I had gone in Roanoke, Virginia, and this was while I was still in college. They had a little comic book con, and they would have some creators over there, and at that point, that's when I was starting to get some things signed. Not a lot of stuff, but I did manage. Well, I just took it out of the bag and board, so I can't display it here. But look at this. X-Men number 94. This is my better copy. I mean, definitely, it has a subscription crease in there. It has a nice, I can see the kind of the fold right there a little bit. But this is still a really nice copy overall. And at that convention was Dave Cochran. And right here is his signature, Dave Cochran. And in the years since, in the last couple of years, I've added Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod, who did the inking. I never really thought about that for years, but when I started really focusing on getting the books signed by all the creators, Bob McLeod's at all the conventions, so I definitely went and added him to that. And that right there is a very special book to me. I mean, we've lost Dave Cochran many years ago at this point, but I had that chance to meet him at least on that one occasion. I don't know if there was 2 different occasions or not, but there was at least that one occasion at Roanoke, Virginia, to get him. Now, one of my favorite stories that I've told on this channel before is I may have gotten this signed, and I know I've got issue number 95 signed as well, but I took a copy of his Futurians graphic novel to get signed, and he was ecstatic over that. And I know he didn't personalize it, but he definitely put a little message on there as well. He was super happy that somebody brought the Futurians book. But this is one that will definitely stay in the PC. I think all I really need at this point, I want to get, is it Lynn Wein? I think I need to get him on there. But right there is definitely one of the best signed comics that I've got in my collection right now. All right, now those were all pretty big books. Well, the Avengers is not huge, but X-Men 94 definitely is. But as I said, this channel is not going to be about just having big books. It's going to be about stories, about my favorite autographs, and some of my favorite books. And here's one right here that might surprise you a little bit. It is Secret Origins number 6. This is from August of 1986. And you'd have some, this is actually a really good book. You get some great art, they'd have 2 stories in there. And in this particular issue, you've got a story with Halo, who is from The Outsiders, Batman and the Outsiders, and then you've got the Golden Age Batman. But why am I getting this book signed? Well, many years ago, I had a chance to meet Marshall Rogers, who did the artwork on this here. Now, this was years after he had done his run on Batman, or Detective Comics, I guess, and even the comic strip. He drew the comic strip Batman for years as well. And I'm not sure if when that comic strip ended or not, so it might have overlapped with this book as well, but he drew the story for the Batman story here. And I remember getting him to sign that. I remember him signing, I think I've got one of those detective books. I think it might have been one of the appearances of the new Clayface. I think I've got him to sign. And I think I had an issue of The Shadow that he did as well. I think I had him sign that as well. But this one right here, because it was Batman, I went ahead and had him sign it. But in the years since, again, here's the theme that you're going to see throughout a lot of this, is you're going to see multiple books getting pulled out and getting signed by multiple creators. And here you go. You can see the splash page right there. You got that beautiful Marshall Rogers splash of Batman right there. But look down at the bottom. And the second book in this video today is another Roy Thomas. And I got this one signed at the exact same time I got the Avengers book signed. But he wrote the story, the Batman story here. Now, in the other story, the Halo story, actually, I have to check real quick, but I know that Luis Lopez, let me get the name right. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez did the cover, or at least part of the cover on this for the Halo. Now, he didn't do the interior, I don't think. Let's thumb through this real quick. Oh, I can tell. This is definitely Jim Aparo. Let me see if I'm right or wrong on this. No, I was wrong on that. It looked like a little bit. It's Dick D'Argino who did the art on there. But that right there, this is a book I will continue to add artists to, and I realized I made a mistake because in the last 2 years I have gotten to meet Mike Barr, who actually did the story for Halo there. So there's a book that will get pulled out again if I ever get the chance to see Mike Barr again. Now, Mike Barr was one of those ones. I know I've missed him and I've gotten him because when I was doing the last episode, I was pulling all of those signature cards out to show you a lot of the autographs that I've gotten over the years. Mike Barr was definitely one of those, and that's a big miss on my part. I try to keep track of these books. Every time we get ready for the convention, I try to pull the books out, but sometimes it's a lot of work. Well, sometimes. It's always a lot of work, so I definitely missed that on that occasion. So this is a book that will definitely get signed again at some point by Mike Barr. All right, so the last comic that I want to talk about in today's episode is a comic that I've probably talked about more than any other comic at all on this channel, about my struggles to get a 9.8 on this. I've gotten my 9.6s, and I struggle to find reasonably priced raw copies of this that I think are going to grade out to 9.8 as well. I think it's a book that just an absolutely beautiful cover. Let me show you too. It's one of my favorites. It is Spider-Man 294. It is part 5 of the Kraven's Last Hunt storyline, and actually this is the issue where you have the death of Kraven. I'd forgotten about that until I pulled this book out to show it off, and I thumbed through it. I was reading part of it again, and I realized, oh wow, this is actually the death scene of Kraven in this. And for me, it was always about this cover. I love this cover right here. Just absolutely stunning Mike Zeck artwork. So who have I gotten signed on this book? Well, let's open it up. And again, you can tell I'm getting these books signed in the 90s when I get a chance. And Baltimore Comic Con was great, guys. For years, that's the only con that I ever went to. But it kept growing and growing and growing. And finally, it started off as a hotel show and then eventually went to the Baltimore Convention Center, downtown Baltimore. And at that point, it exploded with the number of creators. And Mark Nathan, the owner of Cards, Comics, and Collectibles, and his group have always been really good about bringing in a lot of top-notch talent. And over the years, I was able to get Mike Zeck, who showed up at the show. And here, I'm going to show it to you. Down at the bottom, again, here we go, splash page. Mike Zeck's autograph. You've got I'm going to mispronounce this, J.M. DeMatteis, and Bob McLeod. Again, a third book today with Bob McLeod doing artwork on here. Isn't that great? This is just a beautiful copy. This is one that, if I have a really decent role, and if Mike Zeck ever shows up again, I mean, guys, I'm going to ask right now, I'm putting it out there to the YouTube world, where's Mike Zeck? Where is he? I need that guy to show back up and do another show, because I'm sitting here with, it's just like a lot of us, we got a lot of comics to get signed, but I'm sitting here with these beautiful original art black and white prints that I picked up from John Beatty. Secret Wars, Captain America stuff, and actually a Secret Wars one of those is issue number 8, the Spider-Man one, is signed by Jim Shooter as well. I'm sitting here waiting for Mike Zeck to show up so I can get those things signed. So if you guys have any information on Mike Zeck, please leave me a comment in the comment section below. But if he ever does show up again for a convention, I'm lucky enough to be able to go see him again, I will see if I can get another raw with this, because we still have DeMatteis is still with us, and Bob McLeod's at just about every show. I would love to get the cover of this signed and get that as a graded copy at some point. That might be a goal, but it's not going to be a goal until Mike Zeck shows up and shows his shadow. So we'll find out about that at some point. But guys, that's it. This is the inaugural episode of Comics in My Collection that I've gotten signed, some of my favorites. We're going to continue with the series, and I'll scatter these out in throughout the year. I've got great books, great things to get that I've gotten signed over the years. I can't wait to show off more of my PC. I hope you enjoyed this. If you guys have any comments about the books today, definitely leave me a comment in the comment section below. And if you're ever interested in anything that I have on my channel, definitely reach out to me at collectorauctions@yahoo.com or DM me on my Instagram account. You can also reach me or see what I have for sale currently in my eBay store or on my Shortbox page. Both of those links are down in the description of today's episode as well. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next episode. Well, actually, I have no idea what day this is coming out, but you know it's going to be Mondays and Fridays at 10 a.m., so it'll be one or the other. So hope to see you then, and take care. And remember, every comic has a story.